Black Hawk Rescue Mission 5 lore. Not many know about it, but it exists. You can get the idea of how the lore is like by talking to the NPC at Sonatina City. But you know what's surprising? The lore isn't even finished, and they are still working on it. Before I tell you the confirmed lore of BRM5, we have to understand the island that inspired the game. Rondo Island is based off Hata Island, which is located in the Bering Strait. It is mostly a tundra landscape, mostly dead-looking grass, and hold up, is that the Windows XP wallpaper? The highest point is Mount Moffett, which used to be a volcano. The island is home to the Aleut people, who are natives to the island. During the 18th century, Russian explorers visited the island and claimed it as property of the Russian Empire, until March 30th, 1867, when Alaska is sold to the United States, in which Hata Island is also part of the deal. Later, the Americans built some military base on the island, only for the Imperial Japanese Army attacking the island as a part of the island hopping campaign during World War II, and bombed Dutch Harbor, which marked the first aerial attack on continental United States by a foreign power in history. So the Americans fought back the Japanese, and then the nuking, and the end of the war, and yada yada, everything's back to normal. The Americans still got naval air bases operating during the Cold War, until it shut down in March 1997. Now let's talk about the actual lore. Well, let me say that the lore's blank is, you could say it's distilled water. So basically, instead of the island being controlled by the Americans, it always has been a Russian property, and it's surprisingly well developed with 2 cities, a power plant, a fort, and a harbor. Anyway, so the island have a local government which are very corrupt, which enraged the people living there, which led to the creation of 2 militant groups, the Rondo Liberation Front and the Patriot of Democracy. I don't know why there's 2 militant groups when you could just have one, but whatever. The other left is just the generic insurgent group with low-tech equipment, while the POD have higher-tech equipment, allowing them to capture major military infrastructure, and much more authoritarian.
1984.
The Russian military tried to stop them, but failed,
What are you doing in an Albanian prison?
in which attracted the attention of the United Nations and NATO, later forming UNJTF, which sent their troops to the island to stop the violence happening over there. Depending on which ending you get, the UNJTF either stops the POD from launching the nuke, or they fail to stop them. I'm not sure where they launch it, but the community speculates it's launched towards New York. But let me remind you, the lore is not finished, and the devs also said they are trying to incorporate zombies into the BRM5. There's so many plot holes and questions left unanswered. Like, where does the POD get all of these stuff? Hell, they even got a jet. So here's my interpretation of how the lore would be like. And devs of the BRM5 game are welcome to take inspiration. So the story of BRM5 dates all the way back to March 18th, 1867. Instead of Russians selling Alaska along with Rondo remains as Russian property. Later on, the usual happens, such as World War I, the transitioning from the Russian Empire to the Soviet Union. You get the idea. But this is where it got interesting, which is during the Cold War, where the Soviet Union is conducting research on biological weapons, which is supposedly to be launched with an ICBM. So they sent scientists, engineers, and military personnel on the island. Since it's a site that stores a top secret weapon, they made sure it's as secure as possible, with forts, naval base, and an air base. That's until a team of researchers discovered a rare mineral on the island, which can potentially make billions of dollars for the Soviet state, which led the Soviet government to heavily invest into the island and send a bunch of workers to mine the precious material. The Soviet workers lived there and established the main city of Leningrad, and Sakrina, while the native Ronogradian live in the agricultural-based village. The government invested in building power plants to support the residents living on the island. Time goes on, the Soviet Union collapsed, which caused a huge shift in Russian politics as the local government of Ronograd have been replaced with corrupt politicians, which caused a lot of outrage from the pro-Soviet residents, particularly the one who used to or currently serving the military, who are highly skilled soldiers, which led to the creation of Patriot of Democracy, which has a lot of funding and support from communist governments such as China, who provided them with resources and supplies in the hopes of making Ronograd into a Chinese satellite state to profit off. This allows the Patriot of Democracy to take control of major military infrastructure, including the ICBM silo. There's also the Ronograd Liberation Front, who are composed of native Ronogradians who are unsatisfied being oppressed by the local government and start rebelling against them as a form of anti-colonialist movement. They were a sincere militant group, fighting for the cause, but lacked funding and support, leaving them in a desperate situation as they can't fight off the Russian army, and so they start controlling everything they have, even their own people, and took control of the Ronograd Prairie with the help of the POD, where they used slaves from the village to mine the rare earth materials and selling them to private foreign companies. A strategic but unethical move. The Russian Federation started to lose the war and requested assistance from the United Nations and NATO to solve the issue. This formed the UNJTF and sent troops to the island for a peacekeeping mission and dissolve the insurgency. Later, PMC and other militia groups are sent too. The UNJTF troops gather intelligence and try to stop the ICBM from launch, but fail. Since the ICBM contains biological weapons, this started a virus outbreak, leading up to the zombies. That's my interpretation of the lore. Some of the information might be false and probably something that doesn't add up. If you do find something that doesn't make sense, please do tell me in the comments, because I would be interested to do a discussion on that. I also wish the devs added more lore related stuff. I'm not talking about the arms company that are canon under the lore, but rather something like the Ronograd police content, since the Ronograd police are featured in the game. I know the devs don't want to add police content into the game, but I think like a local Ronograd SWAT force fighting the insurgency will actually make sense. There's already real life examples of police in war-torn countries fighting insurgents head to head. I would be interested on what the Ronograd police uniform would look like. And oh yes, about the rebel groups using slave labor to sell rocks to private companies. That's because I just finished watching Leonardo DiCaprio Blood Diamond.